Hi, I'm Charlotte Palmer. I'm the country manager for Dominica and I have been for the past few years. Really looking forward to seeing you out there and showing you a bit more of the lovely island.
I'm now going to go through your expedition to Dominica from start to finish. So how you're going to get there, what you're going to be doing, and we'll talk about any other logistical things and health and safety and that type of thing as well. A little bit of an introduction to Dominica as a country. So the spoken language is English and the local currency is Eastern Caribbean dollars. US dollars are accepted over in Dominica, but you will almost always get your change back in Eastern Caribbean dollars. So that's used in Dominica and Antigua and a few of the other islands. If you are transiting through Barbados, then please be aware that they use a different currency, even though they're in that group of islands. The capital is Roseau. You'll find the second largest city being called Portsmouth. And so these names are kind of part of the history that the French and the English battled over the island for a very, very long time, until in the end the English occupied the island for a huge period of time, which is why the official language is English. But Dominica became completely independent. The Commonwealth of Dominica became independent in 1978. Dominica is known as the nature island of the Caribbean. So the island and the forests don't look quite this way at the moment because of the hurricane that came through in September 2017, which I'll tell you about in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. It's still very green and lush, but there was obviously some impacts on the forests as well. But it is known as the nature island of the Caribbean because it's the most forested island by percentage of any island in the Caribbean. It's got beautiful mountains, lovely forests, huge numbers of rivers and waterfalls. There's volcanoes to trek up. There's all sorts of things. So it's very much known as the nature island because of this outdoor reputation that it has, and the same thing for the tourists that go there. So there's very little tourism in Dominica. What tourism there is very much based on trekking and diving and that type of thing, these kind of outdoor activities. There aren't any large hotels, there aren't any of the white sandy beaches that you associate with the Caribbean. It's very, very different to the rest of the islands in that area, but it also makes it really unique and a great place to study wildlife, and that's the reason that Opwal's decided to work out there. It's really important for you to know a little bit about Hurricane Maria that hit Dominica on the 18th of September in 2017. So Hurricane Maria is the most devastating hurricane that has ever hit the island. It hit the island at Category 5. And the thing that was quite such a shock is firstly, this was very late in the season for a hurricane. And secondly, it was predicted to be a Category 2 hurricane, but it sped up to Category 5 with at some points having 200-mile-per-hour winds. And this all happened within a couple of hours. So people had got themselves organised and ready for a Category 2, but not for a Category 5. So it really did have a big impact on the island. There was no word off the island for a couple of days, and then there was a loss of electricity, water, obviously phone signal, internet, all of those things were completely down across the island. Before that, there had been a Category 4 hurricane that had hit Hurricane David in 1979, but they're the only two kind of major hurricanes that have ever hit Dominica. So this has been a devastating thing for the island, but Opwal was very much dedicated to going back to work in Dominica and carry on supporting the people that we work with out there. And we had a highly successful season out in 2018 with very little impact from the hurricane on our actual project. And it was great that we were able to go back out there and support the people that we work with. Now, this has really changed the focus of our research in a lot of ways, and it has put us in a very unique position. So, if we want to see some sort of silver lining to this, we are in a very unique position that we had collected data on the birds and the bats and the insects and everything else you find out there before Hurricane Maria. We'd already been working out there for 4 years. We're now in a position where we can collect data afterwards, so we can look at what the bat populations, for instance, were like before the hurricane and what's happened after the hurricane. Now, one of the things that we found was that it wasn't that we found less wildlife necessarily, but things were very different. So for instance, with the bat populations, before Hurricane Maria, we found mainly fruit-eating bats, particularly the Jamaican fruit bat. 90% of our captures were that species. Since the hurricane, we have caught very few of the Jamaican fruit bats. We have caught some, so that they're still there, but actually it was the insect-eating bats are the ones that we're finding in much larger numbers. And so the hurricane has kind of changed the population dynamics, and it'll be interesting over time to see if this reverts back to the way it was, or if this is a permanent change, and to investigate further why this has happened. Being able to do this type of investigation really will help us to be able to advise on how we look after our wildlife after such an event like this, a hurricane or a typhoon or any other kind of big event like this. So it's very, very important research, very unique research that you'll be involved in. And as I said, we had a fantastic season in 2018. Our data collection went very well, and we found some really interesting things, which we'll tell you more about when you're out on the expedition. So I don't want you to expect any major impacts on your expedition, but just keep in mind what happened. This is a very big, devastating event. So now there is electricity across the island. Water has been put back everywhere on the island as well. Phone signal is absolutely fine. Internet isn't everywhere. So we don't have internet at our camps. We do have phone signal, and on my phone, I have a data package, so I'm able to receive and send emails if anybody needs that during the time they're there. But some of these things are still just coming back into place. You'll also see bridges that have come down during the hurricane. So if you head over to the Three Rivers camp, so we have two camps, one of which lost a bridge, and we now have to walk through a river to get into camp. So you'll see that. We may have still potentials for either electricity or water being cycled between villages. So at the forest camps, you won't need to worry about this, but potentially at Fort Shirley, the water supply, it supplies not only Fort Shirley, but two other villages as well. And last year they were cycling water, so we would have water for 5 hours, and then it would go to another village, and then it would go to another village, and then it would come back to Fort Shirley. So we just have to think a little bit about filling up water bottles and timing showers and that type of thing. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'm sure by the time we are out there again in June, July, in August later on this year, that these problems will have been solved. But it's just something to keep in mind when such a big event like that's happened. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about why we actually chose to work in Dominica and why this area is so biologically important. So one of the criteria that OPWOL has for working in any site is that we work in places that are biologically important, so we have rare species there, and are under some sort of threat. And that is what we try to mitigate against, that's what we try and help with, and that's what we collect data on. So looking at Dominica, I talked about how Dominica is the nature island of the Caribbean. It's the most forested, it's the most pristine, most intact as far as natural resources are concerned. But the Caribbean in general is what we call a biodiversity hotspot. So for anybody who works in conservation, you will know that there is limited funding, as there is with most things. There isn't unlimited funding to try and protect biodiverse areas of the world. And Conservation International, which are a big conservation body, came up with biodiversity hotspots to basically look at priority areas for conservation and research for the future. So they wanted to look at, per unit area, how can we protect the most species? Because it is just unrealistic that we are going to completely protect every part of the planet. There is urbanization and farming and things that have happened and will need to happen in the future. So they looked at these biodiversity hotspots. So each of these hotspots is biologically important, as I said, and this is measured by the number of what we call endemic species. So species that are found in that area but not found anywhere else in the world. And then the second thing is the amount of threat. And the way they've measured the threat is to look at the amount of original habitat is left within that area. So every biodiversity hotspot has less than 30% of the original habitat left. So it's that shows the amount of threat. And they have more than 1,500 vascular plant species. So that's basically more than 1,500 plants that are found in that region and not found anywhere else in the world. and I'll go into a bit more detail about how the Caribbean fits into that. So just looking a little bit more in depth at the biodiversity hotspot, you can see that the Caribbean very much fits within those criteria that Conservation International have set out. So they ask for 30% of the original habitat, or less than 30%. The Caribbean has 11% of the original vegetation, so it's a much, much lower number. They also ask for more than 1,500 plant species, endemic plant species, whereas the Caribbean has 6,500. We've also got lots of other species there that you don't find anywhere else in the world either, lots of birds, mammals, amphibians. And an example of this is the parrot that you can see in that photograph. So this is the imperial parrot, or locally known as Cicero. They're only found on Dominica. You don't find them anywhere else in the world. And unfortunately, they're highly endangered. Definitely one of the world's rarest parrots. So before Hurricane Maria, we thought there was about 250 to 300 of these individuals left. After the hurricane, there's been very, very few sightings. So we've had 11 confirmed sightings and more sightings on top of that, but it's difficult to tell between them and the other species of parrot that's found on the island. So you really need a little bit of expertise to be able to work out which one's which. But there has been reports that more of them have been heard and more of them have been seen. So hopefully the populations are really starting to recover. But that's just one of the many things that we're investigating while we are out on the island. I wanted to quickly talk through the rough route for you to get out to Dominica. So no matter where you're coming from, you are definitely going to be taking more than one flight to get to the island. You can't get large planes onto Dominica. It's the runway's small and the airport's small. And so they only have propeller planes of a maximum of 48 people on the plane coming into Dominica at the moment. So if you're coming over from America or Canada, you're likely to be coming in through Puerto Rico, depending if you're coming through Central or South America as well. You would be likely to be coming through Puerto Rico. If you're coming over from Europe, then you are likely to be coming into Antigua or maybe through Barbados. Either way, you will all be landing on larger islands or islands with larger airports anyway, and then taking a short hop over to Dominica on a smaller plane. Once you arrive at the airport, it's all very easy. So you small plane, small airport. So you all walk off the plane and into one hall, which is immigration and arrival hall and customs and everything else. So it's one room and it's not very big. So you'll be asked to fill in a entry form, an immigration form. They'll be checked off that and they'll check your passport. They'll give you a little stamp in your passport and then you'll head through to collect your bags. There isn't really kind of a baggage collection. You don't they'll basically just take the bags off the plane and come and put them in the hall and you can pick up the ones that are yours. So then after that, you may have your bag looked through. Sometimes they do that. So there will be some people kind of doing a bit of a customs inspection. Most of the time they see our students have got rucksacks and they know exactly what you're there for. So they'll just kind of let you pass through, but it's possible that they might have a little look in your bag. Then after that, you walk outside the door and you will have a representative from Operation Wallacea there to collect you. So it's all pretty easy. As you go through immigration, they will ask where you're staying. So I've noted this down later in the presentation, just to note down the address that you're staying. It's only short, but they just want to know where you're staying for the duration of your expedition. So just to be clear, you're going to be coming into the Douglas Charles Airport, which is in the north of the island, and then the bags will be delivered into the main room. You pick them up, and as I said, they might be inspected. When you go through immigration, which is just a couple of desks as you come off the plane, they're going to ask you where you're staying, and you need to put down one of two things. So as part of your travel package and also for this training materials, it'll state which forest camp you're staying at. Everybody's going to be going to Fort Shirley for the marine project, but we do have 2 forest camps. So you're either going to be staying at Three Rivers Eco Lodge in Rosalie or the WNT Centre, Pontcassé. WNT is the Waitakabuli National Trail, so it's just a centre there that we use as our kind of campground at Pontcassé. So just write down the address that's suitable for you. To be honest, it wouldn't matter which one you put down anyway, as long as you're putting down something that they know that you've got accommodation once you get there. So just check over the title on the training package here, or also your travel information. Any problems, you can just give me a shout and I can clarify for you. Something to just bear in mind is that there is no ATM or money exchange at the airport. In fact, money exchanges don't really exist in Dominica. So when you're coming into Dominica, you need to either have US dollars if you're happy to use US dollars and get your change back in Eastern Caribbean dollars, or you need to have Eastern Caribbean dollars already. So think about getting that in your home country if it is possible, and at the latest do it when you are transiting through either Antigua or Puerto Rico. So make sure that's all been organised. As soon as you step out the door, you'll be met by an Opwell rep from CATS Tours. CATS Tours are the ones that run our buses. So then you'll get up on the buses and they'll take you out to where you're going to be for your first week. So just to give you a bit of orientation around the island. So if you see the blue star that's under Dominica, that is where the airport is. So you're coming in at the north of the island. From there, you're going to take the central road. So the yellow lines here are the only main roads on the island, basically. You can see the big gaps where the Northern Reserve is, where the reserve is in the south of the island as well. These are basically big mountains. And so we just drive around the edges of the mountains. So you'll come down to the centre, and if you're at the WNT centre, then you'll be staying at Pont Cassé, where you can see that dot, which is pretty much in the centre of the island. Or if you're staying at Three Rivers, then you'll head over to Three Rivers Camp at Rosalie. Both these camps are very, very similar and actually just down the road from each other. So that was where you'll be spending the first week. At the end of that week, you will head down to Roseau, which is the capital. And from there, you'll be getting on a whale watching boat and you will take that up the coast to Fort Shirley. And then at Fort Shirley, you'll be staying there for your second week. So your marine week is at Fort Shirley. End of that week, then we drive over the top of the island back to the airport for you to head home. So there are all the different locations. Nice thing is that even though, because this is quite a small island, it's about 19 miles by 25 miles. So you're going to get a little bit of a feel for the island and visit different locations on the island in the country. That's great. Bit of a summary of what you're going to be doing. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because that's what we've concentrated on other presentations. So your first week, you're going to be at your forest camp. As I said, there's 2 forest camps, both very, very similar and doing exactly the same activities. And you'll be doing the Caribbean Island Ecology course, which will be made up of going out with the bat team, the bird team, the insects. We'll be doing some habitat surveys, all different types of research, as well as doing some lectures and other activities as well. On the Sunday, you'll then head down to Roseau and you'll take the whale research boat all the way up to Fort Shirley. And then your second week will be spent up at Fort Shirley, where you'll be learning to dive if you're doing the PADI open water diving course, or you'll be doing a reef ecology course, which is similar to the first week of heading into the water and doing surveys, either diving or snorkeling. Looking at the facilities you'll have at your forest camp, just to make you aware and prepared for the project. They are quite basic facilities. You know, we are kind of camping and roughing a little bit, you know, being out in the forest. So they'll either be tents or single sex dorms. We have a mixture of having some tents and a few buildings as well. And we just do that based on ratios and numbers of people that are coming. So there's no particular kind of preference of who's going where, but we'll organise that before you come to site. If you've got particular requests, then I'll work with your teachers on that. All the food is local food. So we have breakfast, lunch and dinner. Breakfast and dinner will be held in camp, and then you'll usually take a packed lunch out with you. You're often out for a full day working on these surveys, sometimes in different parts of the island. We have a mixture of both long drop toilets and flushing toilets, but they're all private, all set up and organised. But we do have a mixture of the 2 of those, and it is limited electricity at the camp, so the electricity is run from solar power. So really just depends if we've had a nice hot sunny day, which we do most of the time, but that's just something to bear in mind. So just keep things charged when the electricity is on. There's some phone signal. I can't guarantee that your sim from home will work out there. That's something for you to have a look into if you're wanting to be able to use your phone at all. And also just bear in mind international charges can be huge, when you don't have a local SIM. So there's some phone signal, but there isn't any internet at all, just so you're aware. I will have a phone which has data on it, so if parents need to send emails, want to get a message out or anything, my email address is at the end of the presentation, so just note that down and feel free to send me an email, that's no problem. A bit of a summary of your first week. So when you first get there on the first day, we'll do a bit of site orientation. We'll do the health and safety talk, get you settled into your accommodation, do all those types of things. So the day you get there is fairly relaxed, and you get onto site in the afternoon. And then we'll be doing a series of other things. The rest of the week is going to be full of activities. So we're going to give you a background to the research project and all the research we've done already. That will be done through a series of different lectures. We'll have at least one lecture a day. We're going to be teaching you some essential survey skills, and we'll teach you that at the start of the week, so that you're able to help the researchers and help the scientists out on these projects. And then we're going to be doing surveys on birds, bats, invertebrates, both terrestrial and freshwater. We're doing habitat surveys. We'll be doing surveys on anoles, which are small lizards on the island, and we'll also be looking at marine invertebrates down at Champagne Reef. You're also going to get a chance to learn a little bit about the natural history of Dominica as well. So you're going to spend a day working with a volcanologist and visiting different locations across the island. Because Dominica is actually made up of 9 volcanoes, so it's really interesting to learn how that's sculpted the island and what impact that's had on the wildlife and natural history. Just as a note here, I think it's just important to note, although your first week is technically your terrestrial week, so your week of working in the forest, we do have one marine project. So one day you will head down to a place called Champagne Reef, and you'll be doing surveys down there. It's a snorkeling day. So one day in your first week, you will be out in the water, be doing marine work. This is a really unique place, and the reason we visit that from the forest site is that it's just closer to where the forest camp is, but it's this particular reef that's very, very important for us to look at. So this reef is near one of the volcanoes, and the reason it's called Champagne Reef is that there are bubbles coming out of the ground. So when you swim through the water, it looks like you're swimming through champagne. So these bubbles are full of CO2 gas, full of carbon dioxide, and what these bubbles and the carbon dioxide have done is actually lowered the pH of the water. So the pH of seawater is usually about 8.1, and the carbon dioxide has lowered the pH to about 7.7. Now, with ocean acidification, and if you've been learning anything about climate change, and you'll learn more about this on the project, predictions for ocean acidification are that in 100 years' time, our oceans will be at a pH of 7.7. So basically, this area is a unique natural experiment. So it's a way of us looking 100 years in the future, what our Caribbean reef's going to look like. So that's something that we're studying, and you'll be helping us by taking pH samples. We're going to be doing some snorkeling transects and quadrats. We might be looking at some of the crabs and the snails and things that found that area, and what the impact of this lowered pH has been. So just bear that in mind. It is a snorkel project. We do have snorkels available on site for you to be able to use, but just be prepared that you're going to do some snorkeling in the first week as well. So at the end of that first week, we're going to be heading down for our forest camps, either at Rosalie or Pontcassé, down to Roseau, the capital, and just beyond the capital, to get on a whale research boat, and you'll take that journey up to Fort Shirley. So the drive down to Roseau is going to take maybe 45 minutes, an hour, something like that, in a bus, and then you're going to get on the boat. So the quicker we can get you on the boat and out in the water, the more likely you're going to be able to see whales when you're out there. So another thing that's really unique about Dominica is that there is a population of sperm whales off the coast of Dominica that don't migrate. So it's only the females that don't migrate in this area, but everywhere else in the world, both the males and the females migrate to different areas of the ocean at different times of the year. For some reason, we have a population that stay just off the coast of Dominica all year round. So you really do stand a good chance of seeing them. It is not guaranteed by any means, but the team on the boat will try and track them down with hydrophones. so you have a chance of seeing sperm whales. There is also the other possibility of seeing dolphins and other types of cetaceans as well. Really, even if you don't see anything, it's a lovely boat journey up the coast of Dominica and being able to see Dominica from a different view. Yeah, it's a really, really beautiful journey. You're going on a catamaran, so it isn't a boat that tends to rock too much, but do bear this in mind if you do get seasick, that think about bringing seasickness tablets with you, and also, you know, make us aware of it so that we have some seasickness medication out on project as well. So think about putting that into your portal details when you're filling in your medical details. But it's a great transfer and takes about 3 to 4 hours to get you up to Fort Shirley. So you'll get to Fort Shirley at about lunchtime, and then again it'll be a bit of an orientation day, and you'll actually get in the water the next day. So it'll be Monday before you start your diving and snorkeling. Fort Shirley is a national monument. So it's a 17th century fort that was partially built by the French and then completed by the English, and that is where the soldiers were when they were occupying Dominica in the kind of early days of the British occupation of Dominica. So this wasn't a particularly successful fort, unfortunately. There is no malaria on the island anymore, but at these times in the 17th century there was, and the fort is built near a swamp, and you find lots of mosquitoes in swamps, and so there were serious problems, and a lot of the soldiers became very, very ill, and not after a long period, it was actually abandoned, and the fort was kind of taken back, or the forest took back the buildings and took back the land, and so there was just kind of ruins in the forest. Then in the 1980s, a chap called Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, a Dominican guy, managed to source some funding along with the EU and actually rebuilt the fort. So he took what was left and managed to rebuild it. So the buildings that we use are the barracks, which you can see in this photograph, which is where the soldiers were, and also the officers' quarters. So we have those two buildings for our sleeping and accommodation. There's showers and toilets inside the barracks. There's also toilets inside the officers' quarters, and we also have our lecture facilities in there as well. So we basically use those two buildings for our lecture facilities and also for our accommodation. So there's dorm rooms in both the buildings and also small apartments in the buildings as well. And then we have a big lecture hall in that building. But it's quite comfortable. You're on top of a little hill, so there is a little hill to walk up to get up there, but you get fantastic views across the bay, and you basically get to stay in an old national monument, which is really quite a privilege. This is the dive centre at the bottom of the hill. So the dive centre and where we eat is at the bottom of the hill, and the accommodation is at the top of the hill. So the dive centre is where all the dive equipment and everything is, and then also where you would take any lectures and classes if you're learning to dive will be taken down in the dive centre. The facilities, the rooms, you have beds that are either bunk beds that are built in like this one or these ones, or we have some metal ones as well. You'll have mosquito nets. You also have mosquito nets at the forest if needed. If you're in a zip-in tent, then obviously you don't need the mosquito nets, but if you are in any of the dorm rooms, then you would have mosquito nets. There is electricity in here, and as I said, it's running water. Do bear in mind that we could have a little bit of rolling electricity and water when it's being sent out to other areas of the island. So as I mentioned previously, just bear that in mind with keeping things charged. But it's fairly comfortable up here, and we kind of have the facilities to ourselves, so that's great. During your second week, there's a couple of different options of what people can be doing. So firstly, you can learn to dive. Can I urge you to, if you haven't done already, please go onto the portal and put in what your chosen option is for the second week. I have to staff according to what you have put into the portal. So whatever you have put in there, that is what I will take you as doing, and then I will be staffing according to that. So please fill that in if you haven't done already. So the first thing is to do the PADI open water diving certificate. So this is basically if you're learning to dive and you don't have any dive qualifications already and you would like to. Please bear in mind you have to fill in your PADI medical questionnaire. This is also done through the portal, and that needs to be done as quickly as you can so that you're able to take part in this. I'll give you another reminder in this presentation as well, but you also need to have your PADI crew pack for doing this course, which includes the manual and also the form that's filled in by your dive instructor called the PIC, and that's how we sign you off and say that you're completely qualified. You can get this physically through our website, but you can also have an electronic copy as well. But either way, that needs to be sorted as soon as you can. We can't sort it for you once you get to Dominica, so this needs to be done before you go. So that is if you are learning to dive. So that's first option. Second option is to do the Caribbean Reef Ecology course. So this is more going to depths about marine biology, and you either do this snorkeling. If you don't want to dive at all, then that's no problem, then you would snorkel instead, or you can do this diving. But to do this diving, you would need to be qualified to open water level before you came out on the project. So just bear these things in mind when you're filling in on the portal what it is that you're going to be doing. So you do a series of lectures and then marine surveys and marine survey techniques in water. It is more difficult for us to get you involved in marine research simply because we can't talk to you underwater. So it's not the same as when we're in the forest and we can talk about how to identify a particular bird or frog or whatever it is we're looking at. You just can't do that when we're underwater. Secondly, also the skill level. You know, if you're a new diver, you might still find that your buoyancy isn't great and you're kind of floating up to the surface and then sinking again and a little bit all over the place and more thinking about diving rather than surveying. But we will get you as involved as we possibly can. And if you're learning to dive, you'd still get to come in on these lectures, but your in-water time is learning to dive, whereas for people who are already dive qualified or snorkeling, your in-water time will be learning about fish identification and quadrats and transects and all the other survey techniques. At the end of the second week, you then take about a 45-minute journey across the north coast in the buses back to the airport, and then from there you just start your journey home. Heading home, when you get to the Dominica airport, all quite simple again, just a small airport, so it'll take a very short time to get through checking bags and that type of thing. So yeah, that should all be just a fairly smooth process, and then you will have your short flight to head over to wherever you're connecting and then heading home from there. So in the next few slides, I'm just going to go over a few other things that I think would be important to think about before you come out on the expedition. So I've already mentioned about the PADI crew pack, but just to re-emphasize this because it's really, really important. If you are learning to dive, you are going to need to have a PADI crew pack with you. This can be a physical version or there is a online version as well. There's an electronic version. Either one of these you can get through our website. You can also get them at local dive centres as well. If you do get it anywhere other than our website, can you please check that it has both the manual part of the crew pack, but it also has what's called the PIC. So if it's an electronic version, then you're going to have an e-PIC. And if it's the physical version, it would be a piece of paper. This is basically the part that your diving instructor fills in. It is then sent off and you get in the post your card, your qualification card, like your driving license. So just make sure it has both of those things. For spending money, there isn't a huge amount of places that you can spend money in Dominica, but please do think about your journey, where you're stopping, if you need to be getting any kind of snacks or drinks or meals or anything along the way. And then at each site, there is a small kind of tuck shop that will sell kind of fizzy drinks and chocolate and that type of thing. You obviously get all of your meals included already, but if you wanted to bring a little bit of money for that type of thing, then you can do. And same at the marine site. There aren't many places for getting kind of souvenirs and that type of thing. You may get to pass through the capital just once or twice during your expedition, but you don't need to think about huge amounts of money for that. And also, as I said, just please make sure that you either have US dollars or Eastern Caribbean dollars when you get to the island. You're not going to be able to do any exchanging from any other currencies once you get to Dominica. There is also something else you might want to consider for university applications or generally just to kind of add to CVs. Something you are able to get as an OPWOL student is the Universities Award, which is an award that's recognised by UCAS, which is the kind of the UK application service for getting you into university. That doesn't mean that if you are not going to a university in the UK or you're not from the UK that you wouldn't want to get this certificate. It just recognises everything you learn on the project, and it can enhance personal statements and personal essays to get into universities or colleges. If you want to do this, there are details within the training page. So there's a link to get you to an application form, and the cost for that is £25, and then we will post it out to you after the expedition. These come out after the expedition because you have to have actually been away with us to qualify for it. So these will come out, start sending them out in August type time. Little checklist of things before you go. Check your passport and make sure it's valid for 6 months after you get back. Dominica isn't really very strict on how many months you have left on your passport, but the countries you pass through on your way are and ask for 6 months. So don't just, if you're looking for information, don't just look at the Dominica site because they just ask for it to be valid while you're there. But the other countries that you are passing through, so going through Antigua and if you're going through the US and going through other countries, then you will find that those countries do ask for you to have at least 6 months. So make sure you have that. As I said, bring any money in US dollars or Eastern Caribbean dollars, or use the ATM at the airport at your transiting country, not in Dominica. So the local currency is Eastern Caribbean dollars, and it's set at a rate of 2.7 Eastern Caribbean to the dollar. Make sure you have your diving paperwork and make sure you have told us the options. So please get onto the portal, tell me what you would like to do in your second week, and make sure you have filled in your PADI medical questionnaire if you are diving. Please do that immediately. Sometimes, depending on medical conditions, you might need to see a doctor, and the last thing I would want is for us to not be allow any of you to dive or take part in the marine projects. I've also recorded a kit video and a health and safety video, so have a look at those when you've got time. We've broken them down to smaller chunks because I know we're throwing lots of information at you. The kit list video goes through exactly what you should bring out to the project, so it's worth watching that. Last but not least, definitely have a look on our website. There's loads of videos and all sorts of things on there that I think could be useful. So definitely have a look through that and really look through all the training materials that we've prepared for you. I've really tried to think about everything you could possibly need to get you prepared for the expedition. So make sure you have a good look through all of it. And if you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. So I'm going to be leaving the office early June. So if you've got any questions, please get them into me by the end of May at the latest, so I can get back to you in time. Because once I'm out in Dominica, things do tend to get busy. And although I will be on emails, it's just not as easy when I'm answering them from my phone, and time differences and all this type of thing. So if you've got any questions, I'm based in the UK office, so you can always call us or call me here. Or this is my email address, charlotte.palmer@opwal.com. So please feel free to ask me anything you need to about the project. Well, hopefully this has been helpful, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you all out there in Dominica.